the Quran Circle. The topic for today's Quran Circle is the final prophet. Just about the Quran Circle, so we do Quran Circles on at a very frequent level. Like we have got Brothers Quran Circles that happen every fortnight at 4 locations in Perth, and then we have got Sisters Quran Circles which happen every week during the weekdays, and then we have got this Family Quran Circle where we try to come up as families and then discuss a topic. So today the topic is the final prophet. And that's our final Quran Circle for the year as well. So the first question could be that why we are discussing this topic? Why is this topic so important? This topic is a part of Muslim faith, Muslim belief, that we believe in the finality of the prophethood of Prophet ﷺ, that there won't be any prophets coming after him. The question is, why do we believe in that? Are there any textual evidences for that? And are there any people who claim that there would still be prophets coming in? So this is what we would try to explore today, inshallah. So there are various reasons why we should be interested in this topic and why we should study that topic. So I'll explain some of them. Now, there are many people who have claimed prophethood. After the completion of the prophethood at Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there are some people still coming in and saying that they are the prophets. How would we judge if their claim is true or not? So it's very important that we should understand the logical as well as the textual reasons of why there can't be any prophet after Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So those people are now spreading their global dawah. They are outreaching people and trying to communicate their message. So we have to be aware of where their claims are lacking and how they cannot be supported by the textual evidence. They have world missions. They send their missions around the world, especially to the poorer countries where people are willing to change their faith for a piece of bread. So they send their people over there and try to preach them and also try to convert them. Door-to-door campaigns happen in Australia as well. We ourselves have seen that. So, and especially they try to work with children. And they once came to our house as well. And they said that they want to take your children to the ground behind and we'll just play with them and have a good time. And when we inquired a little bit further, then we came to know that they were from the Baha'i faith and it was their way of preaching their religion. So we have to be aware of those things. Then in Perth CBD, sometimes you people might have seen people wearing the shirts, I'm a Muslim, ask me anything. But in fact, they are appearing to be Muslim, but they are actually not. So we have to know. They are the followers of a person called Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Qadiani, who claims to be the prophet. So we have to know, if we have got the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ with us, if we are blessed to have that, and then some people come and try to snatch that guidance away from us, we have to be aware of them. Then in US, our sister organization ICNA works, Islamic Circle of North America. And ICNA has got a department called Why Islam? And why should people accept Islam? So nowadays, some of the Ahadees or the Qadianis over there have also started an organization with the same name. It's an irony, if they have to do the preaching, they should use their own name. But they try to imitate the names that the Muslim organizations are using. So that is why we have to change our name to Gain Peace. And that is the name with which we work in Australia as well. Gain Peace Australia and Gain Peace US. Similarly, in Perth, there were multiple movie shows of one of the founders of the Baha'i faith. So if we don't know what that faith is, what they are calling towards, what their doctrines are, it's very easy that our kids and ourselves can fall victim to their claims. So we have to know what is truth and what is not. Similarly, when it comes to the books, the titles of the books that they write are very similar to the Muslim books or the Islamic books. So we run this library library called Australian Islamic Library. And when we are collecting books for that library, we very often see that there are books from Qadianis or Ahmadis which are indifferentiable, indistinguishable. We cannot differentiate if this book is from a Muslim or from a Qadiani or an Ahmadi because they use the same names and so on. Especially when it comes to the translation of the Quran. They have translated it in so many languages of the world that and when we don't understand who has published it, we can't read it, it's very much possible that those translations, we would be promoting them. So I had that experience on my side as well, on Australian Islamic Library, where some of the incorrect translations did make their way into the library. Then we started to verify, and then we had a few publishers, and then we only now use books published by those publishers. And whatever we verify, we mention that this translation is verified to be correct. For example, King Fahd Press in Saudi Arabia. They have published translations in multiple languages. So we know it's a trustworthy translator, so we mention that this translation is verified to be correct. And that's where the formats come in as well. So all their translations are on the same format. Even if we don't know the language, from the format and so on, we know that this is published by that particular publisher. Then exposure to their dawah through friends. So my own brother-in-law, so he was given dawah towards Ahmadi faith from one of his friends, from one of his very close friends. So we all are exposed to these things. So we have to know what they're calling towards and how we can protect ourselves from these kindness. And exposure through media. Nowadays, you can go on YouTube and find anything. So everything and anything is accessible. So we have to be able to sift the truth from the disbelief and belief. And why should we be studying this topic? So our topic for the Quran circle is this ayah. مَا كَانَ مُحَمَّدٌ أَبَا أَحَدٍ مِّن رِجَالِكُمْ. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is not the father of any one of your men. He is not the father of any one of your men. He had 4 daughters that survived till the age of adulthood. His male children died in the infancy. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that he is not the father of any one of your men. وَلَكِنْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ, but he is the messenger of Allah. وَخَاتَمَ النَّبِيِّينَ, and the seal of the prophethood. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمًا, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has got the knowledge of everything. He is knowledgeable over everything. So this is the ayah for our discussion. And this is the ayah in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the seal of the Nabiyyin. And that is the ayah, ironically, which has also been misused by some people to claim that the prophethood has not finished on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we'll try to understand why and how. Now, in this ayah, you can see 2 words. One word is Rasul, and the other word is Nabi. Many people ask that, what is the difference between these 2 words? And why do we have these 2 words if they mean the same thing? The answer to the question is that they do not mean the same thing. One of them is generic, and one of them is more specific. The word Nabi is the one who conveys. It's a generic meaning. And Rasul is the one who's given the Sharia as well, who's given a book, who's given a particular Sharia. So that's the difference between the 2 words. Every Nabi cannot be a Rasul, but every Rasul is a Nabi as well. So one is a broader category, and in that broader category, some people are selected to be the Rasul, to be the Rasul. So Nabiyyin, who convey the message of the God on the permission from God, and then there are certain people among the Nabiyyin who have got the status of being the Rasul. They are given their own code, their own Sharia, their own book. So that's the difference between the 2 words. Now, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Rasulullah. He has given his own Sharia, his own code. So he is from those selected ones. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say that wa Khatam al-Rusul. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Khatam al-Nabiyyin, that neither a prophet nor a Rasul would come. So that's the beauty of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses the word. So in every word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses in the Quran, there is a beautiful wisdom behind that. So, and that wisdom we often cannot see in the translations. So we should try our best to connect with the Arabic language as well. And when we connect to that, we'll see that this book is a very expressive book. For example, in translation, you cannot see the emphasis. But when I'm talking to you, I would have certain expressions. This is definitely the case. It has got a different meaning as compared to when you read. This is definitely the case. So Quran, when you read in Arabic, you would see that it has got a lot of expressions, a lot of emphasis on certain things. So very important that we should try our best to learn Arabic as well. So that's one aspect, the difference between Rasul and Nabi. So from this, I hear that the Prophet ﷺ was the final prophet and Rasul or messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So numerous traditions. One of the traditions in which the Prophet ﷺ says, Inna masali wa masala anbiya'i min qabli. My example and the examples of the prophets that came before me. What is that example? Kamasali rajulin bana baitan. It's example of a man who made a building. فَأَحْسَنَهُ and made it beautiful. وَأَجْمَلَهُ and really beautified it. إِلَّا مَوْضِعَ لَبِنَةٍ except place for one brick. So the building was made beautiful, but the place of one brick was left. If this building is made beautiful, but one brick is left, what would happen? The people would come here and see, this building is good, but why is that place left open? And then the Prophet ﷺ says the same and tells that there are people who come here and yaqjabun, and they do the ta'ajjud, they wonder, why is that place left open there? And the Prophet ﷺ says that I am that final brick which has been put over there, and there are no prophets and no Nabiyyin after me. So this is from the Ahadees, and there are numerous Ahadees. One of the beautiful books that we should try to read if you get an opportunity is this book, Khatam Nabuwat by Mufti Muhammad Shafi, who is the father of Mufti Taqi Usmani, the very famous scholar. So he was the Grand Mufti of Pakistan. He wrote this book in which there are three sections. One section talks about the proofs of prophethood from the Quran. The second section talks about the proofs of prophethood from the Sunnah. And the third section talks about the proofs of prophethood from the Athar, the sayings of the companions and the early generations. But the question is, the people who deny the finality of the prophethood of Prophet ﷺ, they do not accept the Ahadees. They do not accept our companions as dignitaries. So can we then give them evidence from that, from the Hadith? We cannot. So what we have to do is that we have to deal with them on the things that they accept. They accept Quran to be authority. So we have to give them evidence according to Quran. We also have to give them evidence through logic. That how logically there can't be any other prophet coming after the Prophet ﷺ. So this is what we will try to do. We can present numerous ahadith, but for the people who deny the prophethood of Prophet ﷺ, they do not accept ahadith in any case. So we cannot use that as an evidence when we are in conversation with them. So today, we will focus on two things. We will first have a logical perspective of how logically there is not a possibility of another prophet coming after Prophet ﷺ. And then we will see the textual perspective. The people who claim that they are the prophets, which textual evidences they use, and how can we understand and interpret them correctly. So these would be two aspects of our discussion today, inshallah. Let's start with section 1, which is the logical explanation of why they can't be a prophet after Prophet ﷺ. So, the first aspect is the meaning of Khatam. So, this word Khatam has got two meanings. And those of us who speak Urdu would very well relate to that meaning. One of the meanings of that is to finish something. Something was there and it's no more. Like, isme battery khatam ho gaya. There is no more battery in this one. So, it means that something was there and it's not there anymore. The second meaning of that is to finish something, to complete something. For example, when we give homework to our children and then they complete that, they say कि homework Khatam ho gaya hai. I have completed the task. So these are the two meanings. So let's discuss about them. So when we talk about this thing from the perspective of the prophethood, one meaning of the word Khatama means that there won't be any prophet after Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So that's the textual side of things. The other aspect is that the prophethood has been perfected with Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. If a drawing or a picture is perfect, you cannot make it more perfect. If you try to change it, you would only damage that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that we have also perfected the prophethood with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So for this we need logical explanation and logical proofs. So that is what we would try to do in the next few slides. The logical explanation about the perfection of the prophethood of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. At this point, someone can ask some very logical questions. Someone can say that prophethood is described as a mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the mankind. Now how can that mercy be lifted when human beings still exist? So that's a very logical question. People can ask that. Why are there no prophets? People in this age and time, and the people who are about to come, would also need that mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One can also ask that when human beings still exist, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used to send prophets for their guidance, then why is that guidance not coming anymore? The human beings are still there, and they might live for hundreds and thousands of years, then why there is no guidance coming? So these are very logical answers which require an explanation. So inshallah we'll go through that now. We would be able to find the answers to these questions if we understand 5 important aspects about the prophethood of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And once I describe these 5 aspects, the children, young ones as well as slightly older ones should expect some questions. Alright? So I'll explain 5 aspects and then I'll probably ask some questions to the children and their dads in case of them. So 5 important aspects related to the prophethood of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The first thing, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has been given the complete guidance. When it comes to the Bible or when it comes to the Old Testament, when it comes to the other books, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Fihi hudaw wa rahmah. In that there is guidance and in that there is mercy. But when it comes to the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. So what is this wording here? Al-Huda. So in Arabic, when we write alif and lam with something, it makes it something special, something complete. So the complete guidance has been given to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now at this point, I would also consider it important to clarify that in some places in the Quran, the word Huda is also used for Quran. But when it comes to the complete guidance, it means the guidance of the Quran as well as the Sunnah or the way or the prophetic traditions of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When these two things combine, that is called Al-Huda, the complete guidance. And that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used for Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why? Because the traditions of the previous prophets are not preserved. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not only preserved the Quran as well as the tradition of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's Al-Huda, the complete guidance. So the only one who's given the complete guidance is our beloved Master, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The second aspect is that the prophethood of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was global. When we look at the previous prophets, they were sent to a particular nation or to a particular group of people. For example, Isa alayhi salam. So when people wanted them to join the fight against the Roman Empire, and those zealots were fighting, they invited him to join them. So he said that no, I'm only sent towards the people of Bani Israel. I'm only sent towards the Jews. I'm not sent to Romans or anyone else. My scope of job is only this. And this is present in Quran as well as this has been told in Bible. In Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that Isa alayhi salam said, وَرَسُولًا إِلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلِ, that I have been sent as a messenger towards Bani Israel. Anni qad jitukum bi ayah. I have come with a proof from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Mirabbikum from the Lord. I have come with a proof from the Lord. And then the ayah continues. But the Prophet Jesus told us that he has only been sent to Bani Israel. And Bible testifies to that as well. In that, once a woman approached Jesus and asked something, and Jesus replied, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. I am not concerned about other people. That is my scope of job. So previous prophets were sent to a particular nation in a particular period of time. But the prophethood of Prophet ﷺ is global. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ, and we have not sent you illa, except كَافَّةً لِلنَّاسِ, except for the whole mankind. We have not sent you except for the whole mankind. So he came for the whole mankind. Bashira wa Nazira, the giver of the glad tidings and the warner. وَلَكِنْ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, but majority of the people do not understand, they do not have the knowledge of it. So that is the global prophethood of Prophet ﷺ. Now let's see some logical proofs of that. When the human beings came into this world, the first man who came was also the prophet as well. Prophet Adam was also the prophet. He was the first human being and the first prophet. So the prophethood and humanhood, they started at the same time. And then they progressed. The children of Adam ﷺ, they used to live alone. They used to live just with their family, maybe in the cave or somewhere. So all they needed to know is how to interact within their families and how to interact with their brothers and sisters. So that's all they needed to do. Then people formed tribes. A lot of people started living together and tribes came into being. And then there were certain laws related to those tribes, like how to deal with each other, how to have financial transactions. These sort of guidances were given to the prophets of those tribes. Then various tribes started to live together, and then the constitutions came into being. Then bigger empires came into being, and then we had like global empires, the superpowers, and so on. So humanity evolved, and as the humanity was evolving, the role of the prophets was evolving too. And when it reached peak, then the Prophet ﷺ was sent. Now, one of the students of Allama Dr. Muhammad Iqbal, his name was Yusuf Salim Chishti. He was a very close student of Allama Iqbal. He spent a lot of years with him. And he wrote commentaries of a number of books of Allama Iqbal, the commentaries of his books. So, and he was a master philosopher. Just like how Dr. Iqbal was a philosopher, he was also a master philosopher. And he analyzed all the philosophies and concluded that in the era between 600 BC to 600 AD, all the major philosophies had already come into existence. And then whatever is coming afterward is just repacking the same liquid into another bottle. It's the same thing with slight deviation, slight change, mixing a few things, but all the philosophies had already come into existence till that time. So when the humanity reached that level, when all the philosophical foundations were already laid out, then the Prophet ﷺ was sent. When it comes to the social system and the political systems, when all those things were already in place, world powers used to exist, the Prophet ﷺ came. 1200 years or between 600 to 1200 years before the Prophet ﷺ, Aristotle wrote the book Republic, the Republic. So all these things and thoughts were already in place. And then Prophet ﷺ was sent. The main thing that people required at that time was a system of social justice. And that's what the main aspect of Islam is. A just system, a system of social justice. In which, whether we talk about the political system, whether we talk about the economic system, whether we talk about the social system, you would see a common thread all across. Justice and mercy. That's what the Prophet ﷺ came to. One of the things, side points I would like to emphasize over here is that when some of us try to become religious, the first thing that we do is that we straight away resort to certain aspects of faith. That how am I doing wudu, how much I'm praying and so on. All these things are extremely important, but they do not have to be overlooked like the system aspect of Islam does not have to be overlooked. The Prophet ﷺ he came at the stage when the humanity required that system, and that is the religion which gives guidance about all these aspects. It gives guidance about social system, financial system, family system, political system, the system of justice. All these aspects are covered within Islam. We should not confine ourselves to just a few beliefs and just a few rituals. So we have to look at Islam holistically, and that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that we have to enter Islam completely. Udkhulu fi silmi kaffa. As the Prophet ﷺ was sent to the whole mankind, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that you and I should enter Islam holistically too. So that's very important requirement from us. So the civilization was at a level when it could be, when the last prophet, the best stage for the last prophet was to come. So that is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the final prophet. The third aspect is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala perfected the deen for us. Look at this ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Al-yawma akmaltu lakum. Today we have perfected your faith. One word is kamil, which means complete. It has got a superlative degree. Akmal, the best form, the perfected form. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we have perfected your deen for you. If something is perfect, you cannot make it more perfect. If you try to fidget with that, you would only damage that. You would only destroy that. It cannot be made more perfect. If there is a bottle and it has got a cover, and the bottle's cover is perfect fit for that. If you try to increase its size or decrease its size, it would never be a fit. So it cannot be made more perfect. So we cannot add or remove anything from the religion. The new prophet, there was no need for that because the religion was already perfected at Prophet ﷺ. There was nothing remaining to fulfill which the new prophets were required to come. Unlike what Jesus said, who said, as quoted in Bible, that I have got a lot of things to tell you, but the one who comes after me would complete this guidance for you. So that is what Jesus told. But with the Prophet ﷺ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that Al-yawma akmaltu lakum. We have perfected your deen for you. Wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati. And I have completely completed my ni'mah, my blessing upon you. So there is nothing left in that. Wa raditu lakum al-islam deena. And I have chosen Islam as your religion. I have accepted Islam as your religion. So this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in this ayah. So if something is perfect, it cannot be made more perfect. Just connecting it to our previous discussion, what is the meaning of the word deen? So deen is a system of life. That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هُوَ الَّذِي أَرْسَلَ رَسُولَهُ بِالْهُدَى وَالدِّينِ الْحَقِّ لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُشْرِكُونَ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent Prophet ﷺ with a complete deen. And the reason for that is that it should be made prevalent over all the other deens in the world. So deen is a system of life. It's a way of life. And this is the explanation that we get from Quran as well. For example, the deen or the system of Fir'aun was also referred as deen. The system of Fir'aun was also referred as deen. So that's a way of life. So our struggle has to be to implement a way of life that is in conformance with the systems of Islam. It is not just confined to few acts of rituals, few acts and rituals and so on. We have to look at the things holistically. For example, in this country, education. We are getting our children in the hands of the system. Whatever system teaches them, they get acquainted with that. They spend their time on that. But the institutions like this, Australian Islamic College, Langford Islamic College, and other institutions, what they are trying to do is that they are trying to create that environment where people are given the Islamic values, where the education happens with Islamic values. Similarly, there are institutions which are helping us live our life, the financial life, according to the Islamic financial guidelines. And there are other aspects as well. So we have to look at the system aspect and see the pockets where we can make our contribution, inshallah. So that is the concept of deen. but it's never implemented anywhere. If I tell you an excellent way of making a biryani, but I never make it, how good is that recipe? You would always question that, and you haven't shown me that this works. So the Prophet ﷺ not only gave a model, but also practically implemented that as well. The only prophet who started as a single person, when the revelation came in the cave of Hira, he was just one person. And from one person, in the matter of 23 years, the whole Arabia had become Muslim. And his companions were moving to all the different parts of the world. Just one person could do that in the history. If you study the revolutions in the world, you would see for most revolutions that idea came from someone, and that person was a bookish person, could never implement that idea. And then someone else picked the idea and brought a revolution on the basis of that. Sometimes it does not happen in one lifespan. It happens in multiple lifespans. Sometimes it is so short-lived that as soon as the revolutionary dies, the revolution dies as well. But you and I are still Muslim after the more than 1400 years of the revolution of the Prophet ﷺ. And his revolution is perfect in all aspects. Let me give you an example. In US, in early 1900s, they tried to ban alcohol because you all know it causes so much problem. So many accidents happen because of that. So many workplace incidences happen because of that. So they realized that, and they thought that we should ban alcohol. So they tried. But people did not accept that ban. Though they were loyal to the government, they didn't accept that ban. But now let's look at the revolution of the Prophet ﷺ. When the alcohol was banned, and the Prophet ﷺ sent the announcer to tell the people that alcohol is banned. So whoever was about to take a sip, he dropped it over there. Whoever had it in his mouth, they just spat it out. Whoever had it stored in their houses, they just broke those containers. And the streets of Medina were flowing with alcohol. So that's how they were. Someone who had already drank that, they vomited it out. That's the level of love that we have for our Prophet ﷺ, which is unmatched in the history. When it comes to our beloved Prophet, he can do anything in his love. So that is the power of the deen and the power of love. So the Prophet ﷺ implemented that. Another aspect that we have to consider in that regard is that he implemented it at human level. He did not implement it at miraculous level. Allah SWT could easily convert the city of Medina to Islam straight away. But the Prophet ﷺ did a human struggle to tell you and I that when you are in that struggle, you would have to go to the Taif. People would throw stones at you. You would have to be patient in those circumstances. You have to continue with your mission. You would have to go into the Badr and take all your belongings of the last 15 years and put them in the battlefield. And then go into the prostration and ask Allah SWT that whatever I had, all the wealth that I had put in the path. Now help us. And then the help of Allah SWT will come. As the famous poet in Pakistan, Indo-Pakistan, Allama Iqbal says that Fazaye Badr paida kar, farishte teri nusrat ko, utar sakte hain ab bhi gandhon se, qatar andar qatar. So on us as well. But what we have to do is to sacrifice everything. Just give everything that we have to the religion. And then expect help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It would not happen if we sit in a corner and recite Ayatul Kalima 100,000 times. So it has to come with a practical struggle. Fazail Badr to paida hogi when we create that environment, only then the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come. And that is why again Allama Iqbal says, या वुसअत अफलाक में तकबीर मुसलसल या खाक की आगोश में तस्बीह मनाजा. So there is one Allahu Akbar that we do in the skies, when we are in the field, when we are in the path of Allah and we say the takbir. That takbir is very different if we sit in a corner and we do Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar on our knees. It's very important that we should go into that struggle. The goodness of deen that has come to us, we should go out there, make an effort to convey it to others as well. So that's our responsibility. Allah's help would come. Also, the fourth aspect is that the Sharia or the Deen of the Prophet ﷺ is preserved forever. And it is preserved in three forms. One form, the Quran, is an unchanged book. So if you pick a copy of the Quran from Australia and you went to Java and you read from the book and ask a person, a Hafiz, a memorizer to recite it to you, you would not find a difference of even a single word. And you can do that and experience that and practice that across the world. You wouldn't find any difference. In fact, there was a study done in 1948 in which they collected manuscripts, old and new, from across the world in Germany. And they tried to identify is there any difference in them? And they couldn't even find a single difference. And recently, at Birmingham University, they identified some manuscripts of the Quran and they carbon dated them. And the carbon dating revealed that they were in the period of the era of the companions. And that had Surah Taha written on those manuscripts. And they couldn't find a single difference between those. So it's been the same, it would remain the same, it's an unchanged book. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has preserved the book for us. But that is not the only aspect. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says that revivals would keep on coming. The book is preserved, but the revivals would keep on coming as well. As Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَبْعَثُ لِهَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ عَلَى رَأْسِ كُلِّ مِئَةٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send for this ummah at the head of each century. Each 100 years. مَنْ يُجَدِّدُ لَهَا دِينَهَا. The people who would revive their faith for us. So the dust would get accumulated on the faith, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send revivers who would renew the faith for us. So these people would keep on coming every 100 years. So not only the book is preserved, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also sending the people who make an effort, who give their life and revive the faith. And this hadith is the Sahih hadith. Similarly, not just the revivers would came, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells that all the time there would be at least one group in my ummah. The Prophet said that Allah would always keep at least one group in this ummah who would be on the path that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed, who would not deviate from any path. And people's mukhalafa, people's opposition to them would not harm them anything. They would sacrifice their lives, they would do anything for their religion. And if people are opposing them, if people are against them, that would not let them deviate even an inch away from their path. So there would always be a group who would remain in this ummah, who would be steadfast on the path. So these forms of guidance Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has preserved for us. Book is preserved, the sunnah is preserved, there would be revivers coming into this ummah, not the prophets, but the revivers, and there would always be a group who would be on the right path. So all these forms of guidance are available for us till the day of judgment. Now with all this, do we need another prophet? The model, the practical model is implemented. The guidance that was given was a complete guidance. The system of life that was given was at a phase when philosophical level of humanity had reached at its peak. And now whatever we see in philosophy is makes a match of what we already have. So at that level, the complete deen, complete system was given. The book was preserved, the sunnah was preserved, the revivers are coming. Logically, can we then have an evidence of having another prophet? And this thing is called Qari Abbas, the thing which is of no benefit. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not do a thing which is of no benefit. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not do Qari Abbas. So we have to keep this in mind. So logically it proves that there cannot be any other prophet coming in. There is no need for that, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not do a thing that is not beneficial. So that was section 1 of our talk. We now move on to section 2, in which we see what are some of the textual evidences that the people who say that they are prophets, they bring forth, and how those evidences are misrepresented or misinterpreted. So we'll now go through them. Now these are the two people who in recent times have claimed the prophethood. One of them is called Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Qadiani, He came from India and he was an offshoot of the Sunni school of thought. And on this side, we have got Mirza Hussain Ali Baha'u'llah, who was an offshoot from the Shia school of thought. So now we'll briefly go through them and try to understand where they have gone wrong. Now, a point that I emphasize in a number of Quran circles, I would again emphasize here. And the point is that if we want to avoid misguidance, if we want to stay on the stay path and avoid any form of misguidance, there are three sciences that we have to study and also make our children study. These are very, very important three sciences. First of them, Usul al-Tafsir. Usul al-Tafsir is how to interpret the Quran. There are various ways of interpreting the Quran. What is the right way? What is the sequence that we have to follow when understanding the Quran? And the scholars have defined the principles in the light of Quran and Sunnah that how should we understand the Quran. The first aspect is that Quran has to be understood in the light of the Quran. Then Quran has to be understood in the light of Sunnah. Then the Quran has to be understood in the light of understanding of the companions. Then the second generations. And then at the end comes the dictionary. And when you will see the forms of misguidance, what they would do is that they would put the linguistic or the dictionary above everything. So, and this is just a very brief crux of the field. There are a lot of other details as well. So it's a very important field to understand if you want to avoid false ideologies and misguidance. And there are some really good courses on that. For example, there's a course on that by Dr. Bilal Phillips, an excellent course. So if you get a chance, we should do that course. The second aspect is Usul al-Hadith. We have to understand the Hadith. What are its principles? Is Hadith preserved or it's not? What are the different categories of Hadith? Which Ahadees are more acceptable than the others? All these things are under Usul al-Hadith. And then Usul al-Fiqh. Why do scholars have difference of opinion on certain things? Why do some people put their hands here, some put there? Do they have textual evidence? How do these rulings come into being? This is called Usul al-Fiqh. Where does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the figurative meaning? And where is it the literal meaning? So these things are clarified under this beautiful field, very scientific field, beautifully composed by or applied by our early scholars called Usul al-Fiqh. So if we know these sciences, we would be able to avoid all forms of misguidance. And today, inshallah, we'll give you a few examples of how the implementation of these sciences can refute the incorrect arguments of the false prophets. Now, that's the main thing, but there is a cherry on the cake as well. And the cherry on the cake is understanding of the Arabic language and history, because some of these things are rooted in their historical context as well. So if we know those contexts, we will be easily able to grasp the whole thing. And inshallah, I will present some of them. So the earlier discussion that I presented to you, that was mainly inspired by a talk from Dr. Isar Ahmed. And this section is mainly inspired by this book from Sayyid Maulana Abul Alam Maududi, in which he explained various statements of the people or the adherents of the Qadiani faith and explained what they think about us, what they believe in, and how those beliefs have got certain mistakes. It was the time, it was in 1951, it was the time after which there was a lot of persecution of the scholars going on. The scholars who were fighting for this cause, they were persecuted a lot, especially in Pakistan. So after writing this book, he also went into the prison and spent time there, and then he persisted with his effort, went to the court, and ultimately they won the case as well. So, and then after that case, the Qadianis were declared as non-Muslims. They were claiming to be Muslims, but they considered all the other Muslims as non-Muslims. And I will explain some of that. So this book is a brief book, a very good read. It's available in English as well. In Urdu, it's called Qadiani Masla. In English, it's called the Qadiani Problem. So you can read through that. An excellent book. So let's discuss about the Qadiani faith first. Now both those people that I showed you, ironically they came in the same era. Both of them were in the 1850s. Both of them were in 1850s. What was that time? the British ruled in India. And so one of them came from India, the other one came from Persia. And as we go through the history, you will see the historical context of some of those things as well. Now, the first thing is that they misuse this verse. The verse that we just recited at the beginning of the Quran Sarda, that Prophet ﷺ is not the father of any of your men, but he is the messenger of Allah and the Khatam al-Nabiyyin and the seal of the Prophethood. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمًا. Now, you will see that in the understanding of this verse, they have bypassed the principles of Usul al-Tafsir. You will see that they would try to interpret the things whatever way they like. And some of it would be very amazing, and you might have a little smile as well when you would listen to their interpretations. So, in this ayah, they have tried to play with the word Khatam. In one of the recitations, it's called Khatam, and in another recitation, it's called Khatim. Khatim is the one who finishes, and Khatam has got various meanings. It means a seal, or a stamp, or an end, also a ring. So sometimes they choose the meaning ring. That Prophet ﷺ is the ring of the chain of the Prophethood. And he has purified the chain, but not finished the chain. Whereas this meaning is not consistent with the Quran and the Sunnah. If we consider meaning seal, that the seal of the Prophethood, after that there is no Prophet coming in, then that seals the deal. There are no Prophets coming in. But the founder of the Qadiani faith, he chose this translation. He is the stamp. And he says that it does not mean that the prophethood had finished, but all the subsequent prophets who would come, they would need the stamp of approval of Prophet ﷺ. But this interpretation itself puts them in a big problem. Because then the question is that did the Prophet ﷺ approve of any other prophet coming after him? And the answer is no. So according to the meaning that they themselves chose, they don't have a ground. So the Prophet ﷺ did not prophesy about the coming of any other prophet after him. So then they had to look for an evidence. So they looked for this ayah. And this ayah says, هُوَ الَّذِي بَعَثَ فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ. Allah, He is the one who has sent from the Gentiles, the people who were not given the book, رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ, a messenger from among them, يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ, who recites out to them Allah's ayat, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, and He purifies them, وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ, and He teaches them the book, وَالْحِكْمَةِ, and wisdom, وَإِنْ كَانُوا مِنْ قَبْلُ لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ, and before that they were in a lot of misguidance, clear misguidance. وَآخَرِينَ مِنْهُمْ, and the one who come later on. لَمَّا يَلْحَقُ بِهِمْ, the ones who have not met yet with them, the ones who have not yet joined them. وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. So they say that these people who are mentioned here, the ones who have not joined him, is basically talking about me. But anyone who understands even a little bit of Arabic, that person will know that the words used here are hum, him, which is a plural form. It is not used for one person. It cannot be used for one person. So they say that I am combined with the Prophet. I am basically the spirit of the Prophet who has come back to the world again. So this is what they say. But we can see that even knowing a little bit of Arabic, you can easily refute that this is not the case. But if we don't know Arabic and they open translation in front of us, there is a high possibility of misguidance, especially for our kids and so on. So it's very important that we should try to learn Arabic, at least to some level. Then this is the evolution of the claims of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Qadiani. You will see that they use the terms which are already in existence. They try to give themselves a label. So whenever we see someone claims a prestigious label for himself, then that's a red flag. If people give certain person a label that that person is Shaykh al-Ahadees and so on, that's a different thing. But if person himself claims that I am the Shaykh al-Ahadees, I am the Mujaddid, I am the that person, then that is a red flag. So he initially claimed that I am the Mujaddid. And at that time, just a little bit of historical context. So wherever the British rule or the European rule was established, They wrote a lot of books. They studied the classical Islamic books and tried to translate them. And they also tried to send missionaries across the world. Australia is an example, where a lot of people were forcibly converted to Christianity. The Aboriginal people over there were not given the identity till the time they accepted the Christianity. And this happened across the globe. A lot of African nations were Christianized in that area. But that approach didn't work in the subcontinent. Because of the scholars over there, they really remained steadfast to their faith and they did not give up their faith. But they tried to cause some deviation in them. So they wrote books attacking Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, disrespecting him. And there's a book, if you guys would like to read, it's called Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in Europe, 1,000 years of myth making. And that's not written by a Muslim. So you can see how for 1,000 years they were trying to create myths and try to demonize the character of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So it's very important for us to have the first-hand knowledge so that we can refute these things. But at that time, in the British era, a lot was written in the disrespect of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So this person, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Qadiani, stood up to the rescue of the Prophet and said that I am the defender of the Prophet. And he wrote a lot on this topic. And then claimed that as I am defending the honor of the Prophet ﷺ, I am the Mujaddad of this century. I am the Mujaddad, I am the reviver. So he started with that. And because of his work against those who were disrespecting the Prophet, he got a lot of acceptance among Muslims as well. So people started to follow him, started to praise him, and he was then known as Mujaddad. Then, with the consultation of some of his colleagues, which is well documented, it is documented in the letters that he sent to various people. They consulted and said that what can we claim next? And the next name was that I am the promised Mahdi. I am the promised Mahdi. Then after a short while he said that no, I am the Masih. And I am the Jesus. Because Jesus is promised to come back, so I am that Jesus. I was taking a Mahdi, but I am Jesus. And then he said that I realized, I have been told that I am Zilli Nabi. Zil means basically the shadow. So I am the shadow prophet. I am not just Jesus, I am actually a prophet in my own. But I am a shadow prophet. And from then it further evolved and he said that I am the actual Nabi. And whoever does not believe in me is just like he doesn't believe in any other prophet. He is not a Muslim. So whoever does not believe in me is not a Muslim anymore. So that was the claim. And that claim is well documented even in the books or the letters that he wrote 3 days before his death. So till his last day, he had this claim. Now with this, we have to understand a golden principle. And the golden principle is that we should not follow those who cut us from the early generations. We have a number of traditions of the Prophet ﷺ regarding when the Mahdi would come, where he would come. So when these people come in, they immediately cut people away from the early generations. That their interpretation was wrong. My interpretation is right. So wherever we see that someone is trying to cut us from the generation of the companions and the early generation, that's a red flag. Secondly, if you see someone who himself gives him certain titles, then that's a red flag as well. So we should be very careful of those people. So, little bit of context into history. So that was the British era. And these people declared that giving your full submission to the British government is half of your faith. It was part of their belief, part of their faith to have an unconditional support to the British government. And he also wrote a lot of praise, in fact in their holy books, about the Queen Victoria, the Queen of the British. Also, he rejected the Ahadees. So he said that Ahadees that go against my prophecies, I reject them, just throw them. And also went against the Ijma. What is Ijma? The Prophet ﷺ said that my Ummah can never be united on a disbelief or a thing that is not the truth. My Ummah is a mafhum or the interpreted meaning. My Ummah would never unite on the thing that is not correct. So from here, Imam al-Shafi'i, the great Imam, identified the principle of ijma. That if the Ummah unanimously agrees on something, that thing has a hujjah, is a proof in the religion. So, and then there are different meanings and interpretations of ijma. Is that the ijma of the companions? Is that the unanimous agreement of the scholars? Is that the unanimous agreement of everyone? But when we look at this particular problem, it is the unanimous agreement of the companions, as well as the unanimous agreement of all the scholars till the 13th centuries, and the unanimous agreement of all the Muslims for not 1 year, 2 years, for 13 centuries. So it's such a great ijma on this principle that there would be no prophet or Rasul or the messenger after the Prophet. So they rejected that. Whatever does not align with my philosophy and my thought, I reject that. They declared the struggle, the jihad, to be haram. So British government was there, and some people were trying to gain freedom from them. So they said that the jihad is haram. They won't do that. So British government were pretty pleased with them. And till date, their center is in UK. So their main center, their global headquarters are in UK, still under the patronage of the British government. At that time, British government wanted to give them the title of Muslims. Even though the Muslim scholars were making a struggle, making an effort that these people have committed disbelief, they consider us to be non-Muslims, so they are not part of the global body of the Muslims. But the British still wanted to give them the title of Muslim. Why? Because that way, if someone is converting to Ahmadi faith, that person would not think that I'm going out of the fold of Islam. So they wanted to have that ummah within the ummah, the division within the ummah. So for the sake of that, this thing was nurtured and it was supported. Then now comes the misinterpretation of the Ahadees. So in the letters that I mentioned, so these guys were writing letters to each other that what should we claim next. So one of his caliphs said to him that if you claim the title of Masih or the Jesus, then people would question that there are a number of traditions of the Prophet, a number of Ahadees, which mention that Jesus would come down in Damascus, and then he would come down on a white minaret, and then he would come down in two yellow shawls. So what would we do with those narrations if we claim to be Jesus? So then they played with those things as well. So they interpreted it in their own way that the two yellow sheets means the two types of diseases. Because when it comes to the interpretation of the dreams, certain symbols are linked to certain types of meaning. So the yellow sheet in dreams sometimes represent a disease. So he said that it's actually talking about those two diseases. And I have got a disease of headache and I have also got a disease in my lower body and abdomen. So these are the two shawls, the yellow shawls, in which I have come. And then he could not find a city of Damascus in India. So he said that it's basically an ista'ara. And ista'ara, if someone can help me translate, it's like something which is used in the meaning of something. Like something taken on loan. So he said that this word is actually an ista'ara. It does not mean the actual dimension. It means a town where the people who live have got the characteristics of the Yazidis. So Yazid government was first established in Damascus in Syria. So he said that those would be the people who would have these sort of characteristics, really bad people. So I will be raised among them. So this word is therefore an istara. Now the last thing remaining was the white minaret. So he said that okay, we have played with these two, let's not play with this and let's make our own white minaret. So then they made a minaret of their own, and this is the minaret that you would see, this white minaret, which basically they have taken from the Ahadees, in which it is said that Jesus would descend upon a white minaret in Damascus. So that is from where this symbol comes. And fortunately, it's very fortunate that this symbol has come. Now wherever we see that, we know that this is not a Muslim website. So when you see these things this time, then it means that it is coming from an Ahmadi background, which is not Muslim. Also, let's understand some of other evidences that they mention. They also mention Ahadees, in which it is mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ said that Inna Risalata wa Nabuwata Qadin Khatat, that indeed the messengership and the prophethood has finished, it has been cut off. فَلَا رَسُولَ بَعْدِي, indeed there is no prophet after me, messenger after me. وَلَا نَبِيَّ, and neither a Nabi. Neither a Nabi nor a prophet would come after me. And then the people asked him questions, but the Prophet said, وَلَا مُبَشِّرَاتٍ. However, what is remaining are the Mubashirat. And then the companions asked that what is Mubashirat? So then the Prophet ﷺ explained them that this is the good dreams that the believers would see. And it is one of the parts of the prophethood. It is one of the parts of the prophethood. On the basis of that, they think, okay, so the prophethood has not finished. But in order to explain that, I'll give you an example. If you go to Riwayat restaurant in Harrisville, I think, or maybe Kent. So you go there and you ask them that, do you have chicken kadai? And they say, no, we don't have chicken kadai, but we can give you some salt. And you say, okay, so one of the ingredients of the chicken kadai is available. And you go out there and tell people that they have got the kadai in there. The kadai has not finished. They are telling you that just that one ingredient is there. It does not equate to the whole thing. So if the good dreams are coming, that's a part of the prophethood, but it cannot be claimed to be the complete prophethood. So this is the sort of way they misinterpret things. And the one who receives a good dream does not become a prophet. It's just a window through which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him about the future. So it's not a sign of prophethood. Also there is a hadith in which it was said that one of the companions said that had the son of the Prophet been alive, he would have been the prophet. Someone asked him that, did you see the Prophet's child before he died? He said that yes, I saw. And it was such a good kid and I thought that if he grew up, he would become a prophet. So they picked this and said that as the companion said that it means that there is a possibility of prophets coming. But look at this ayah and try to understand the same meaning. The Prophet ﷺ is asked to say by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Qul in kana lirrahmani waladun, say if Ar-Rahman would have a son, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have a son, فَأَنَا أَوَّلُ الْعَابِدِينَ, then I would have been the first to worship him. If had Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala got a son, I would be the first one to worship him. Does this mean that there is a possibility that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have a son? It's just a logical fallacy of trying to understand the things the way they want to understand. Some of the other things, and I am extremely sorry for the type of language that you see in there, but it is from their books. Some of the people question that why the Qadianis are declared as non-Muslims. So you can read at your own and see what they believe, and then decide for yourself. They consider you and I to be the non-Muslims. All of us are non-Muslim in their eyes. We are the people of the book, and they use the most obscure language for the people who do not adhere to the Ahmadi faith. And all the references of that you can find in the book that I mentioned, the Qadiani Masla or the Qadiani problem in English. All the references are available in that. It is very unfortunate. The prophets are known by their character. You can identify if someone is a true prophet or not through their character. If you look at the character of the Prophet ﷺ, if he had only one shawl that he had, and someone comes and asks that, give me that shawl, the character of the Prophet is that he would remove it, fold it, and give it to him. That's the character of the Prophet. And look at his words. Look at his mercy. And compare that with this type of language. Can this come from a prophet? So we have to question these things. That the prophets are known by their character and conduct. And there is a book called Dalailun Nabuwat, the evidence of the proofs of the prophethood, in which 3,500 prophetic traditions have been gathered together, in which it is explained how the prophecies of the Prophet ﷺ came into the reality, how he prophesied extremely correctly what was going to happen. 3,500 narrations. And then we look at these people. In their own life, their prophecies were proven incorrect. He wanted to marry a woman, and he wrote a letter to the father of that woman. that if you do not give me the hand of your daughter in marriage, whoever marries her would die. And Allah's wrath would be on your family. And the father did not choose to give him his daughter. And the person that she married didn't die. Also, there was a very famous scholar, Maulana Sanaullah Amritsri. So with him he did a mubahala. And he said that whoever is on the falsehood would die with a particular disease. So both of them made the prayer. So this person died 6 months after that. And Maulana Sanaullah Amritsri lived many years after that thing. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala proves these people wrong within their lifetime. And when we look at the character of the Prophet ﷺ, his words, his actions, his sacrifice, the way he dealt with the people, he was the most smiling people, so loving that even a child could get his finger and keep him moving throughout the city of Medina, and he would not take his hand out unless the child takes his hand out. So this is the character of the Prophet. And also these people boycotted the Muslims. When they were living in British India, they boycotted the Muslims. And Rama Iqbal wrote a book on that as well. So that book is also available and you can find out. And he explains how they boycotted the Muslims. And then the religious text very clearly state that their ways of worship are very different and entirely different to the ways of worship of non-Ahmadis. So they themselves say that we are not the same as you, we are different. But we have got some people who say that how can they be declared as non-Muslims? And it's not an easy thing. There was a long discussion, long debate that happened in the court, in the Pakistani courts. After which the court analyzed all the evidences and then declared them as non-Muslims. So we have to go through those documents and understand the reality of things before someone comes and decides us. So how should we deal with them? If we come across such people, we should talk to them in the best of the manners. As Muslims, it is not our way that we should become abusive or we should become disrespectful. So as Muslims, we should exhibit the most excellent character. And then we should talk only on the evidence. We should not talk about other things. We have to talk about evidence. And evidence can only be from Quran and Sunnah. It cannot be based on the practices of some of the people. Because some of the people within the Islamic faith also have done a lot of disrespect to the religion. They have done some things which the Qadianis quote as well, that this is what your elders have said. So our dalil is not what they have done. Our evidence is what is in the Quran and what is in the Sunnah. And the discussion should be based on theology. Often you would see when you talk to them, they would turn the direction into persecution that they may or may not be facing in some countries. So they would change the direction. So we should talk about evidence, we should talk to them respectfully, and the evidence should be from Quran and Sunnah. Now let's briefly discuss about the Baha'i faith, and we will not spend much time on that, we will briefly go through that. Just like the Qadianis, they have also misinterpreted a verse. And the verse is, وَيَسْتَعْجِلُونَكَ بِالْعَذَابِ. They are trying to hurry you for the punishment. They say that there is a punishment that you promised. We are disbelieving in you. So where is the punishment? وَلَنْ يُخْلِفَ اللَّهُ وَعْدَهُ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not go against the promise that He has made. وَإِنَّ يَوْمًا إِنَّ رَبِّكَ كَأَلْفِ سَنَةٍ. Indeed, the day in front of your Lord or in the court of your Lord is equivalent to 1,000 years. So do not make a hurry. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not immediately give you the punishment. So Allah's days is of 1,000 years. So Allah would choose when He has to give the punishment. But Allah's days is not the same as your day. Mimma ta'udun. So whatever you count, whatever others you have, it's not the same. Allah's counting is not the same as yours. The day is 1,000 years. So on the basis of this said that after 1,000 years, a new prophet would come. So after the 1,000 years of the prophethood of Prophet ﷺ, his Sharia is now to be invalid. So a new prophet has to come. So on the basis of that, they try to justify their prophethood. And that's their center. It's the Baha'i center. And you know where it's located? It's located in Israel. in the city of Khatam. That's from where they operate and they conduct their global operations. One of their beliefs is the unity of faiths, that all the faiths are the same. Those of us who have studied the history of the Indian subcontinent, they would know that this is not a new concept. There was a thing called Deen-e-Ilahi, which the Mughal Emperor Akbar tried to launch, saying that all the religions are one. But if you test it logically, can you say that someone who says that God has a son is equally right as the one who says that God is alone and does not have a partner and does not have a son? It's logically incoherent. Both the statements cannot be true at the same time. So this, and you will see this attempt being made in movies. I've sort of heard some lyrics which basically mention like that all these gods are the same and all these religions are the same, and irrespective of it's a masjid or if it's a mandir or a temple or whatever, they're all the same. So there is a group who are trying to combine everything into one, just like Akbar tried. And it's a form of misguidance. If you mix pure with the unpure, all of it will become unpure. So their story was a little bit different from the Qadianis. Qadianis were living in British India and had a lot of support from them, a lot of funding from them. But they were living in the Ottoman Empire. So they were exiled from Persia. They went to the Ottoman Empire. Initially, the Ottoman Empire facilitated them. And yes, there are some religious people, so let them do whatever they are doing. But when they realized that this is the claim of a new prophethood, then they did not allow them to propagate their religion. So they could not spread as easily as Qadianis did. So their main form of communication was through letters. And then come the Young Turks, which the head of which we very well know was the Khatam Untitled. And when they came, they released all of them. And then they spread all across, went to Israel, made their center, and from there they now control the thing. Now, two astonishing facts. You know how much they give to their faith? 20% of their earnings. So, according to an estimate, 20% of their earnings they give to their faith. You and I, how much do we give? They have got detailed plans available, 5-year plans. Just like an organization, they make plans, 5-year plans. In 2021, this 5-year plan would be finishing and they would make another one. They have also got 50-year plan, 50-year plans of how they would propagate their religion. How much planning do we do for our religion? How are we trying to propagate our religion? When we know that this is the religion of truth, when we know that the Prophet ﷺ is the final messenger, when we know that the guidance that he has brought is the best of the guidance. This is what we hear in every Jummah Salah, in every Jummah prayer, that inna khayr al-hadisi kitabullah wa khayr al-hadi hadi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The best of the guidance is the guidance of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What good is that claim if we are not doing anything for that? If our life is not reflective of that claim, how good is that claim? So you and I should question ourselves that we should also sacrifice something for the beautiful deen and blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Be it the money, be it the time that we give to the religion, be it the thought that you give and think about your religion, we have to give back something to this beautiful blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has given us. So with this, I would leave you with this thought and with this question that what can you do for this deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How can you contribute? How can you play a role? There is so much work to be done. There is so much that can be done for the youth. There is so much that can be done for the vulnerable members of the community. There is so much that can be done for the people who have not yet tasted the blessing of Islam. There is so much to be done. So what is the area where you will do? So select an area, pick something, and let's give back something to our religion, inshallah. So with this, we conclude. So I would request Latif if he has to say a few words.
Assalamu alaikum, and I just want to pay thanks and regards, especially this particular topic is very important for our foundational beliefs. The details were quite technical, so thank you very much for getting him through. So this is the last Quran circle for this year, and inshallah we will try to plan something in January. But start of February, I just want to announce that we are going to have inshallah a kids or family camp. Inshallah we will put the details in a couple of weeks when everything is final. So everyone is requested, they can join that. And now we will have Zohar break, inshallah, in 5 minutes. So you can join the Zohar break.